watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country. Now, here's your host, former Alabama All-American, Mike Johnson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back in the special Thursday edition of Roll Tide Daily. My name is Mike Johnson. We are going to be bringing you the latest and greatest from the Alabama-Clemson Tide. We got a ton of stories we've been talking about all week. We've been breaking down Tua versus Jalen from the Elite 11. We had Mark Schlabach on earlier in the week. Today's a little bit Bama-Clemson heavy, and there's a couple of reasons I want to bring you guys some of that stuff. But first, a little bit of a look ahead. We're going to talk about some of Bama's upcoming opponents this year. Arkansas and Tennessee listed on ESPN's list of toughest three-game stretch schedules throughout the season. We're going to talk a little bit about D'Amico Ryans and Reuben Foster's relationship. But first, let me welcome you guys in the YouTube comment section, the Facebook comment section. Make sure you guys are commenting. Make sure you guys are chatting it up there in the comment section. We love hearing from some of the fans, talking back and forth, getting some of these questions in, talking about some of these topics. I think this first topic has the opportunity to be really some gunpowder for a lot of Alabama fans when they look at what Alabama's tradition has been, what Alabama really has been the last 10 years under Nick Saban. A lot of the national championships, a lot of things they've done. Kind of in their shadow a little bit has been the Clemson Tigers. Dabo Swinney, some of the things they've been doing over in the ACC the last few years really have mirrored what Nick Saban's been able to do in the SEC. You know, Dabo Swinney and Clemson Tigers have been to the college football, playoff the last 3 years. They faced off against Alabama the last 3 years. Well, our buddy Bill Bender over at Sporting News is going to talk a little bit about what he thinks he's going to see in the upcoming year. He lists the Alabama-Clemson rematch, Alabama-Clemson IV, as one of the things that we're most likely to see for this upcoming season. Not only is he kind of questioning the fact that it might happen, he thinks it's a definite. He thinks it's a slam dunk, and we got a quote graphic to show you guys right here, a little bit of the snippet from Bill Bender's column over there at Sporting News as far as what he wanted to bring to the table when you talk about Alabama and Clemson in the coming year. I think we got it right here. There it is. That gap, a product of salaries, coaching, recruiting, and facilities, has given a few powerhouses a huge advantage over everybody else. Georgia, Ohio State, or a Big East team could disrupt this, but it's easier to project the most obvious answer. Alabama-Clemson IV is coming. Obviously, talking about a Big Ten East team in terms of anybody that can step into that kind of bracket that can take over this. Now, I think there's a ton of different ways to look at this, right? We're talking about Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney, though, first off the top. I mean, Nick Saban being the greatest coach in college football history for my money, got a chance to kind of be one of his players up underneath him, kind of see him up close, see the things he does. Really, Nick Saban has transformed the way college football is approached, the way college football coaching has been approached. You know, the staff changes, the staff sizes, whether it be recruiting facilities, you're talking about coaching salaries, really evolving, finding loopholes throughout college football, finding loopholes in the way you're able to do things on a daily basis, finding a different way of doing things. You know, it's the rules keep being changed on top of Nick Saban. Man, you're not allowed to bump into a recruit nowadays at a high school. You can't do this, you can't do that. You can't go on the road in the spring. You're not allowed to have more than 20 headsets. Your staff sizes can't be this much. Only these guys can talk this much on game day. Nick Saban really has changed a lot of the things that college coaches have done. Dabo Swinney, for his part, I think kind of mirrors a lot of the same things that Nick Saban's been able to do. Look over at the ACC. Look at the landscape that Dabo Swinney has really created over there as far as being a head coach. Finds the loopholes, recruits at an extremely high level, finds generational talent and develops it. Look at Deshaun Watson. Look at that defensive line from last year. Look at a lot of the receivers they've had over the last couple of years. Mike Williams, some of the other linebackers they've had inside of that program. It really has become the ACC's version of Alabama. Clemson Alabama IV being on the horizon kind of highlights a lot of the same things these coaches bring to the table. Dabo Swinney doing it a little bit of a different way. But Nick Saban being able to do it in the SEC and Dabo Swinney being able to do it in the ACC really highlights a ton of things that we've been talking about for the last few years as far as this matchup. Now, do I think Alabama-Clemson IV is going to happen? I'm all but guaranteeing as well. Looking at Bill Bender's column, I mean, the reasons are obvious. Look at the talent level. Look at what the schedules look like. Remember, Jimbo Fisher is not at Florida State this year. They're still going to have a high talent level, but can Florida State beat Clemson year in and year out? It still remains to be seen with Willie Taggart at the helm. Can Bama get back to that matchup? I think you guys know how I feel about this, right? I don't see anybody on Alabama's schedule that's going to really be able to nick them in the hills. Obviously, you're going to have the LSUs, you're going to have the Auburns, you're going to have possibly Mississippi State. I think Texas A&M becomes a tough game, but that one's going to be in Tuscaloosa this year. So will they get nipped along the way? I'm not sure. I think that when you look at Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban kind of matching things up once again, I think it's a downhill thing. I think this is one of those things we're anticipating Georgia and Alabama in the SEC championship game. And we're also anticipating Dabo Swinney and Alabama there squaring off in the college football playoff once again here in 2018 when that game comes down to it. So that kind of brings me to my question of the day for you guys sitting out there in the audience, following along, getting in the Facebook comment section, the YouTube comment section. If you were Dabo Swinney, would you want to follow Nick Saban at Alabama? Obviously, this is a topic we're going to talk about a ton. The next 3 years, the next 5 years, however long Nick Saban chooses to be at Alabama and however long Dabo Swinney is successful at Clemson. But I got to tell you guys, I think you need to be a little bit more hesitant than you think you are. Take off the crimson glasses for a second and look around the landscape of college football. Look at coaches going back to alma maters. Look at, Jim Harbaugh hasn't exactly worked out. Mark Richt's trying to figure it out right now. Scott Frost going over to Nebraska. Those are all up in the air. But we don't have to go back that far for me, guys, for me to remind you of Mike Shula. What about Ray Perkins? Look over at Georgia. You got Ray Goff. Look at Texas Tech right now with Cliff Kingsbury. I mean, how is that relationship going to end up? If Jim Harbaugh doesn't end up winning a title, winning a Big Ten title up at Michigan, what does that fallout look like? If you're Dabo Swinney, take off your crimson glasses for a second, and the question of the day is, would you want to come to Alabama? Do you want to be the guy that follows Nick Saban? Or do you want a little bit of a buffer in there? Do you want to create your own thing over at Clemson and still love Alabama and stay at Clemson and create your own thing? Or do you maybe wait until there's a coach between the two? You get Nick Saban, you get that next guy in there, and then if you're Dabo Swinney, you come to save the day once again. I don't think it's as clear-cut as a lot of people think it is out there. And obviously, we already have guys weighing in the comment section. Ron Hall Jr., of course, but how do you make it a more Clemson personality? I think that's one of the more difficult things to navigate here when you talk about Dabo Swinney coming to Alabama. Dabo Swinney's a great coach, but he's not a Nick Saban disciple. He's not a, Jimbo Fisher, Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart, obviously Jeremy Pruitt. Hopefully down the road will be a decent coach up there at Tennessee. He's not a disciple, so I don't think it's as cut and dry as a lot of people think it is to say, boy, you just plug Dabo Swinney in, and he's a great coach. A lot of things would have to merge. Dabo Swinney's more of a developmental guy, or has been until here recently when he gets to coach at the top level. Matt Murrell kind of weighing in says the ACC is a lot easier than the SEC. That's another thing to look at. I mean, look at the road you're going to have as far as Jimbo Fisher, as far as playing Jeremy Pruitt every year. You're going to have Kirby Smart possibly in the SEC East for the next 20 years if he continues to do the same things at Georgia. I don't think it's as easy as a lot of people tend to think it is. So the question of the day, if you were Dabo Swinney, Clemson's current head coach and Alabama alum, would you want to make the move to Alabama after Nick Saban leaves? Dean Mitchell weighing in and says, yes, Dabo would come to Bama when Alabama flashes the big bucks. I think that's going to happen, but let's not forget Clemson will be willing to flash the big bucks as well. Clemson is an elite university in and of itself. Dabo has brought that place to new heights they have never been in their football program. So I don't know if it's as much of a slam dunk to kind of get to that and say, well, the money's going to bring them over. It's going to have to be a Bear Bryant, mama called situation where Dabo Swinney looks at Alabama, looks at Tuscaloosa, looks at the state and says, you know what? That's just not a job I can turn down. Brian Canterbury kind of referring back to Bama and Clemson IV. They don't want Bama. Victoria Lynn Burnick says, I think Dabo comes to Bama. I think I'm with you guys in saying I hope so. I hope that Dabo lands at Alabama. I think he's a proven head coach with a proven track record. I just don't know if it's as cut and dry as a lot of people tend to think it is. I think Dabo's got a lot of things to weigh as far as that situation goes. Lindsey Page says, yes, but not until they fall a little from the Saban reign. Do you want a bumper crop in there? I think that's what you got to ask yourself if you're Dabo Swinney. Hey, I don't want to be the guy that follows Nick Saban, but boy, I'd love to have a lot of Nick Saban's players, wouldn't you? I mean, to have some of his recruiting and think it lands at a high level. As far as things go, I mean, look back at, Florida. Steve Spurrier leaves, you get Ron Zook kind of plugged in. He's a guy that recruited me for a little bit down in the state of Florida. It wasn't until after Ron Zook did you get Urban Meyer back in, who kind of upholds that standard down there at Florida that Steve Spurrier created. Steve Spurrier is another guy, by the way, that goes back to his alma mater and is extremely successful as a head coach, winning a national title down there at Florida. Ron Hall Jr. weighs in. I think as a coach, I'd be hard-pressed to come to a program post-Saban. Big shoes to fill. A lot of you guys weighing in over on the YouTube comment section as well. Make sure to get you guys comment. Jonathan Jennings weighing in says, would rather come in as a savior than a maintainer at Bama. I think that's a great kind of angle to look at. It's kind of what I'm pointing to. Do you want to be the guy that just follows Nick Saban, or not? I mean, look at all those trophies kind of on, on the screen right there. Nick Saban has done things that no other coach has done. I mean, he's legendary. Tyler Gall weighs in, says he will be the guy after the guy fails who follows Nick Saban. So that's a lot of you guys kind of weighing in and thinking maybe there's a bumper crop. Maybe one of those things. Brian Canterbury asked me, how do I feel about Dabo at UA? I think it's tough. I think what Saban has kind of implemented over there in Alabama is one of those things that you would love to kind of keep up the tradition, kind of, have, some of the same brackets, kind of the same, the same way of Saban doing things you want to kind of continue. Dabo Swinney does it a completely different way. I mean, more than one way to do it in college football as far as coaching goes. Urban Meyer's coaching tree. Now you kind of getting the Dabo Swinney kind of thing going on, and Nick Saban obviously with a ton of his assistants. Katie Runnels weighing in and says, no, I wouldn't want to be the guy that has the pressure of following up Saban's State legacy. I think a lot of people are tending to say that. Dabo Swinney, though, I think the other way of looking at that is, listen, those recruits coming in, Nick Saban's not going to stop. Maybe he steps away in the way Bob Stoops did and allow a guy like Lincoln Riley to be successful. I think that might be what you're looking at as far as Dabo Swinney when he tends to take over the program. Now, with all that being said, and please continue to have your comments coming in on Facebook. Love hearing from you guys. We're going to continue to kind of monitor that and get back to this Dabo Swinney, Nick Saban conversation throughout the day. But I thought we had a great article coming from our friends over at Rubbing the Rock, which, as a lot of you guys know, is a Clemson website. And I ran up on an interesting article kind of following up on the conversation about Alabama-Clemson IV. Guys over at Rubbing the Rock had a great article about why they think, in their mind, Clemson's a better football team than Alabama in 2018. Now, I thought a lot of these reasons were kind of interesting. They list 4 reasons as to why that when Bama and Clemson match back up in 2018 or, whether it be 2019 next year in January, when they match up, why Clemson is going to get the W this time around. And I think a lot of them are interesting. I think a lot of you guys will find it interesting as well to kind of look at things from the other side of the coin here as far as Clemson kind of challenging Bama and getting back to Bama's level. The first thing they kind of list is T. Higgins and, Travis Etienne, the receivers that were hurt last year in that matchup with Alabama. Kelly Bryant took a lot of that brunt. I think they're kind of pointing to the fact that these wide receivers were guys that were not on the field for Clemson last year. Now, I tend to kind of agree with Clemson in this aspect. Now, Alabama's secondary is going to grow a ton in terms of where they're going to be, when they kick off the ball, possibly at the end of the season. But secondary will be young. Guys like Patrick Surtain Jr., Savion Smith, possibly Trevon Diggs. Are they ready to go up against elite wide receivers this year with possibly Trevor Lawrence at quarterback? I don't know. I think that I would tend to kind of shade that one in Clemson's direction. But in my opinion, the rest of these answers are toss-ups at best. And I think it's funny to kind of look at it from an orange point of view. The number 3 reason, counting down, equalization along the lines of scrimmage. Now, I'll be honest with you, this one's a head scratch for me. I understand that Clemson's defensive line is returning a ton of talent. I think Dexter Lawrence, Christian Wilkins, Austin Bryant, all those guys could be first-round talent. Those were the same guys that were on that defensive line last year when Alabama matched up against Clemson. Alabama's offensive line returns a ton of the same guys as well, minus Bradley Bozen. So it's hard for me to kind of put that one in, in the angle where you look at Clemson and think, boy, they're really going to take over the game because of that defensive line. Well, why didn't they do it a year ago? Why were they not able to take over the game with their defensive line a year ago? Number 2, counting down, the Alabama losses, the 12 draft picks, the 16 guys headed the NFL, the Daron Paynes, the Minkah Fitzpatrick, guys that caused a ton of trouble for Kelly Bryant last year. I think this one's a little bit of a joke. I think Nick Saban has proven time and time again that he can plug and replace. Oh, Daron Payne's gone? Oh, listen, you got Raekwon Davis, you got Isaiah Boggs, you got Keenan Williams. You're going to have a healthy list of linebackers rushing the edge, making sure they're in Kelly Bryant's space, much like they did last year, much like they did causing some of the turnovers at the end of the game that allowed that Clemson-Bama game to get so lopsided when it comes to the Sugar Bowl. I think that one of the things that you kind of look at with that is, I don't know that was that big a deal last year, and I don't know if it's going to be that big a deal. The losses were a much bigger, reason that Clemson looked so bad last year in terms of losing to Deshaun Watson than it was that Bama ever looked bad. The number 1 reason, too, this one kind of ticks me off, to be honest, when you were reading this from, like I said, this is our friends over at rubbingtherock.com, a Clemson site from Fansided. Sometimes revenge means something. The number 1 reason they're kind of putting Clemson over Alabama this year in 2018 is revenge factor. Now, I get it. I understand that. You lost to the first round to Alabama. The Kenyon Drake kick return, the onside kick. You lose that. When you come back and get them, you score 35, 38, 40 points against Alabama the second time around, and then Bama gets the revenge in the Sugar Bowl. Are we just going to keep going back and forth, playing ping pong, playing tennis with who's going to get the revenge, who's not going to get the revenge? I think it's such an interesting kind of dynamic to look at when you look at Clemson's football team this year, what really they're able to do looking forward. I think it's a little bit of a toss-up to sit here and say, boy, that revenge is really going to be a factor. It's one of those things that's going to push them really over the top in terms of what they're able to do. I want to get back to some of you guys' comments in the comment section. Matt Murrell maybe losing a team they should beat, so they have to beat Bama for sure. Where those receivers giving up all the sacks and rushing yards, Terrence Branyan says over in the Facebook comment section. That's a good question for me. I don't know. I know that we're going to point the receivers, maybe some people making some plays because, listen, the fact of the matter is 2 years ago, Clemson's receivers were able to do that, make some plays, make our corners kind of go up and get the ball, making sure some of these 50-50 balls were caught. Now, does Clemson have that kind of talent at wide receiver coming back this year? I'm not sure that that's one of those things that Alabama really has to worry about And plus, I think the length and the speed and the quickness that Alabama's going to have in the secondary is one of those things that you might not be able to worry about in terms of Alabama coming back and really having to guard some of these wide receivers moving forward. I'm just not sure that that's one of those things that Bama's going to have to worry about when they get towards the end of the season. Now, I know it's going to be a problem early on, Louisville, Ole Miss, some of these teams, but at the end of the year, I'm not worried about anybody else's wide receivers. Nick Saban's the best secondary coach in the country. Ron Hall Jr. kind of weighing in. Clemson has to get back there first for revenge. We'll be waiting. Lindsey Page saying, sorry, Clemson, you're not our rival. Get over it. I think that's a great way of looking at it, too, because you do have some people on the Clemson side of the coin that kind of, they push Clemson up on this pedestal. Hey, you know what? We've won the ACC this many times in a row. I think Dabo's a great coach. I think he's done some great things, but you're going to have to see us in the national championship game or the college football playoff a few more times before you're ready to kind of put them on that pedestal. As far as what they're going to do, Donald and Brittany Schultz weighing in. Any, mini, miny, mo, pick a tiger by his toe. We already have 2 Tiger rivals. Don't need another one as far as Clemson goes. I think that's a great way of looking at it as well. Now, one of the things I do want to point out to you guys that we're going to talk about here, I thought SB Nation had an interesting article looking back as far as non-offensive touchdowns go and how there was kind of a little bit of a lull in production last year as far as non-offensive touchdowns for Bama go. Now, we're talking about Clemson a ton. We're talking about some of the things Bama's done in the college football playoff the last few years. I want you guys to take a trip back in your mind. Remember that Kenyon Drake touchdown a couple of years ago and how, everybody blew up. Kenyon Drake taking that ball to the house against Clemson really kind of changed things. Let's go back a little bit farther. Let's go to 2009, my senior year at Alabama. Marcel Darius, right? The shovel pass, he picks it off, brings it back to the house. Those are game-changing plays. Those are things as an offensive unit you look over and say, thank God somebody else is putting some points on the board. Really kind of picks your entire team up, really does some things that you're not expecting. I think it can really sway the outcome of a game. So I think it's kind of interesting to look at what our guys over at SB Nation are talking about when they talk about this article. I wanted to touch on it as well. Last year, if you remember correctly, Levi Wallace against Ole Miss last year kind of has the pick six. And it's not all the way until the end of the year, Mack Wilson against Clemson, that you get a non-offensive touchdown from Alabama, which is just, it hasn't been the status quo in the last few years for Alabama. I mean, look back at 2016, 15 non-offensive touchdowns. Marlon Humphreys, Eddie Jackson had 3 of them. Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Minka Fitzpatrick, Ryan Anderson. All the way back to 2015, I mentioned Kenyon Drake on the kick return. Cyrus Jones, 4 punt returns. Going all the way back to when I was in school, you talk about Mark Barron. Obviously, I said Marcel Darius. You had a ton of other guys that were really, Javier Arenas. Good Lord, we used to love watching Javier Arenas take kicks back as far as those things go and getting those non-offensive touchdowns. So why do you think they're going to bounce back? Why do you think that 2018 will be different than 2017? I think it's a speed off the edge. I think it's a healthy linebacker core. I think they did a great job. And as far as SB Nation goes, they list kind of the linebackers. They think 2 touchdowns come from the linebackers. Secondary gets 2, kind of pick sixes. Defensive line maybe has a fumble return. I don't even think this is close. I think the defensive line wreaking havoc in the backfield, having those special pass rushers back. Look at Anthony Jennings. Look at Terrell Lewis. Look at Christian Miller. Those guys coming off the edge. Dylan Moses, Mack Wilson, and that linebacking core really being able to get some of those pick sixes and head back toward the other end zone. Malachi Morgan weighing in. Javier Arenas was insane. She also says, I feel like Georgia is trying harder to anoint themselves as Bama's equal than Clemson is. That's possibly true. I think that comes from kind of playing the national title game last year, kind of having that crossover SEC East versus SEC West. Dean Mitchell weighing in, the ACC is less than the SEC. You tend to agree with that too. I think Clemson's going to have their pick of the litter this year. That's why I think the rematch is coming. I don't think that Clemson's going to have that tough of a schedule to navigate through as far as who they're going to play. They're not going to have the Florida State team of yesteryear, in my opinion. I think Florida State's got some rebuilding to do as far as that goes. Now, John C. Bolt says in Clemson dominating SEC talk. Obviously, we don't want to dominate the SEC talk with Clemson, but we want to make sure that we're highlighting what Alabama's got in front of them, and obviously we expect them to be back in the college football playoff next year. Now, 2 opponents that we know Alabama's going to have this year, Arkansas and Tennessee, well, their schedules were highlighted by ESPN a couple of days ago as far as the toughest 3-game stretches throughout the season. We're talking about the schedules. We're talking about Arkansas. We're talking about Tennessee. Here's what they had to say about Tennessee and what kind of schedule they're looking at and what they're doing is in this upcoming season. Here's what they had to say about Tennessee's 3-game stretch. The month of October has been a house of horrors for the Vols. They're just 4-24 against SEC opponents in October over the past 8 seasons. Can I read that one more time to you guys? They're just 4-24 against SEC opponents in October over the past 8 seasons, and it doesn't look real promising this season with successive games against Auburn, Alabama, and South Carolina. The Vols have lost 11 straight to Alabama and 6 straight to Auburn. This should be Will Muschamp's best team. Talking about South Carolina down there. Now, I think what's interesting to look at this too is, you always hear about these teams with these toughest schedules. It's almost never Alabama because Alabama's always in the toughest schedule stretches for the other SEC teams. Look at this Tennessee notion. Look at that 11 years in a row. I think somebody told me yesterday that it's been since 2010 since Tennessee has beaten an SEC West football team. That goes to show you how bad things really have been, when it comes to what they've been able to do. I mean, Bama last year, 39 points, they win by 42. What a slap in the face to Butch Jones, that Tennessee program. I think that tells you how much of an uphill battle Jeremy Pruitt has. A lot of people love Jeremy Pruitt, kind of following his story in terms of what he's trying to do up at Tennessee, but it's an uphill climb. The over-under for their wins this year is going to be right at 6.5. With that 3-game stretch, I think that's going to be kind of tough for Jeremy Pruitt to kind of climb up to. The next Alabama opponent listed on ESPN's kind of top 10. Now, this is throughout the country. Now, this is not SEC teams. Arkansas's tough 3-game stretch. Any stretch that includes both Alabama and Auburn in the span of 3 weeks is never for the faint of heart. Coach Chad Morris will be taking on a major rebuilding job. Finding a way to get even get to 20 points against Alabama and Auburn will be a chore for the Hogs. There's also a home date with Texas A&M, which has won 6 in a row over Arkansas. Now, we can talk about Chad Morris, the SEC West. We can talk about Gus Malzahn until I'm blue in the face. The problem for Arkansas will be their line of scrimmage, their defensive front seven. Being able to push anybody around in the SEC West is a tough task, but when you're Chad Morris and you're running a spread offense and you're trying to push guys around from the SEC West, from LSU, from Texas A&M, from Alabama, from Auburn, it's going to be an uphill climb as far as what they're able to do. Ron Hall Jr. says Tennessee has so many great players. Sad to see them fail so consistency lately. He also says that's kind of crazy. Matt Merle says, "Wow, 4-24, that's tough." Yeah, I think I speak for all Alabama fans when I'd see Tennessee as being a bigger, kind of problem than a lot of people. Not that they're going to be this year, but I think Tennessee's kind of a sleeping giant. I'm kind of rooting. This is going to sound weird coming from an Alabama guy. Kind of rooting for Tennessee to kind of get back to where they should be. The rivalry just hasn't been fun the last 10 or 11 years. It's time for Tennessee to kind of climb back in the driver's seat. Over in the SEC, start challenging Florida, start challenging Georgia. 0-8's just not getting it done. There's a reason why Butch Jones calls Tuscaloosa home these days, as far as that goes. I think it's absolutely a slap in the face to what that fan base has been able to do. Man, I remember a story Paul Feinbaum did back, says Donald Brittany Schultz, when Shula was coach, about Paul Bear Bryant rolling over in his grave because of their streak against us back then. Boy, I'm sure he is sleeping good now. I got to agree with that. Even in 2007, when Tennessee was pretty good, we weren't very good in Tuscaloosa that year. We were able to really beat Tennessee handily, and Ron Hall Jr. says not since Peyton has Tennessee been relevant. Definitely kind of agree with that. Robbie Harris says that we know how they feel. I remember our dark years, bless their heart. That's the truth of the matter. What goes up must come down, and I'm kind of inviting Tennessee to come back in the picture here sometime soon. Now, do I want them to beat Alabama? Absolutely not. I don't think I want them to beat Alabama at all, but just kind of inviting them back into that picture as far as being relevant. Being a team that it's kind of fun to play, making the trip up to Knoxville, watching a good game. Hasn't been that way. You're talking about 40-point blowouts for the most part in terms of what we've seen out of that Tennessee-Alabama rivalry. Just hasn't been the same kind of cigar smoke for the last few years in terms of that kind of budding rivalry. I guess you'd say it's not the same as it used to be historically. Malachi Morgan weighing in said, yeah, the SEC just isn't the same with Tennessee not having a solid program. Victoria Lynn Burdnick saying, I think the Vols will make a comeback for sure. Give them 4 years to start climbing out of the hole and upswing mediocre. Now, I think New Jack says New Jack over in the YouTube page says Alabama, Tennessee has never been better. Logan Westerman says 4 months, ladies and gents. And, a bunch of you guys weighing in over the YouTube comment section. So SEC championship with UGA is an automatic win. Okay, so I guess we don't need to play the regular season. Come on, Mike, you're better than that. That's Philip Yu over in the YouTube comment section. Now, listen, we're still, 86 days out from kicking off against Louisville. I'm not one of those guys to look forward to. But when you want to talk about Alabama and Clemson, I still think there's room for both Alabama and Georgia again to get in the national championship hunt as far as the college football playoff goes. So that's something we're going to look at moving forward, in terms of that SEC kind of clashing off in the college football playoff. I thought an interesting article came out of AL.com yesterday, kind of highlighting Reuben Foster's issues over in San Francisco. He pleads no contest yesterday, gets 2 years of probation to unlawful possession of an assault weapon. Now, that's news in and of itself. Anybody who's followed Reuben Foster's career, followed really, his path to the NFL, followed really his rookie season over in San Francisco, you expect a lot out of Reuben Foster. You always want the best for a lot of these Alabama players heading to the NFL. Well, what's the best way to get an Alabama linebacker to act right? That's having another Alabama linebacker as his coach, and that guy I'm talking about is my former teammate, D'Amico Ryans, who a lot of people don't realize is now the linebackers coach for the San Francisco 49ers. AL.com had a great quote from D'Amico Ryans yesterday. I think we've got that to put up for you guys right here. For Ruben, just being there, being a shoulder he can lean on any way I can help. Not only for Ruben, but all the guys in my room. We have a good relationship. I'm here to help him on and off the field however I can. Now, I think it's interesting to kind of look at that dynamic between D'Amico Ryans, because anybody who knows D'Amico Ryans, and I know all you Alabama fans know this, it's one of the most special players who's ever come through the program. Having D'Amico Ryans in the Alabama program made the Alabama program better. He's one of those guys that's a great spokesman. He's one of those guys that always, was on top of his grades as a scholar athlete. Having him kind of for Reuben Foster to lean on, I think is going to be a great thing for Reuben Foster's career. Kind of looking at that angle, for him, looking forward. I think having D'Amico Ryans kind of in his corner, a guy in D'Amico really understands the ups and the downs of the linebacker position is going to be huge. D'Amico Ryans even went as far as to say Reuben Foster is much better than I ever was. Now, we're talking about a Pro Bowl linebacker, D'Amico Ryans, who played, 10 years in the NFL, did a lot of great things with the Texans, did a lot of great things with the Eagles. Now he moves on to being a coach, and I'm just so happy for Reuben Foster that he's one of those guys that kind of sticks in that corner with D'Amico Ryans. You guys are talking over in the Facebook comment section. Robbie Harris weighs in. That trophy will come through Tuscaloosa for a few more years. Talking about SEC, talking about the national championship. Could be any of them. Victoria Lynn Burdick sends Shula, good analogy. Mr. 6-6 season when beating Iowa State 34-31 in the Independence Bowl. Terrence Branyan says, no sympathy for Tennessee losing. Remember in their mid and late 90s teams and Peyton directing the band for Rocky Top. Listen, I wasn't an Alabama guy at the time, but I know that's a sore spot for a lot of things that are going on. New Jack over in the YouTube comment section talking about D'Amico Ryans and Freddie Roach. Boy, that was a great tandem. That was when I was a true freshman watching back that team of 2005 was really such a great year in a lot of different ways, which leads me on to our way of kind of ending the show today. And you guys know it's Thursday, right? So what is it? Throwback Thursday? I actually have a video today, and D'Amico Ryans' name kind of popping up kind of reminded me of something. It was actually the loudest moment I ever heard in Bryant-Denny Stadium. It had a lot of players in it that you're going to know and love. It didn't have D'Amico Ryans and didn't have Freddie Roach, but it had Brody Coyle, Tyrone Prothro, the connection against Florida back in 2005. Here's your Throwback Thursday video to kind of give you guys a little bit of Bama nostalgia today.
Career healthy now after missing 9 games with a knee injury last year. Off to a good start in 2005. Play fake, Coyle, the senior, wants to go deep for Prothro, who's down there. He's got it, and he is gone. No flags.
Boy, I still get chills kind of watching that video. A little bit of Throwback Thursday. Like I said, a little bit of Bama nostalgia for you guys. Terrence Branyan weighing in the Facebook comment section. Tyrone, all exclamation marks. I absolutely love seeing that video too. That was my true freshman year, and I got to tell you guys, for the rest of my career, maybe other than Rocky Block, now that's going to be a close second, I don't think I ever heard Bryant-Denny Stadium be louder than it was that day in 2005. Mike Shula at the helm of that team, Brody Coyle, J.B. Klausner there kind of lifting Brody up, Tyrone Prothro, Keith Brown, D.J. Hall, D'Amico Ryans, Freddie Roach, Chris Harris, a lot of the things that we can talk about that go on and on with that 2005 team. That was also the day a lot of people are remembering that Tyrone Prothro kind of breaks his leg, which kind of ended his career, which was a somber day. It was a sad thing, but when you look back at that 2005 game, you just remember how great of an athlete he absolutely was. Tim Glover says, love that play. Malachi Morgan waiting on the injury says, sad stuff. Dean Mitchell saying, I was at that game. It was deafening. It was definitely one of the loudest moments in Bryant-Denny Stadium history, and we appreciate you guys weighing in as always. So that has been the week of Roll Tide Daily. Today is Thursday. We're not on Friday, but we'll be back at you guys on Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, bringing you guys all the latest. Make sure if you like the show that you're sharing with your friends on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, wherever you have your social media outlet. We love to get people to join in on the conversation. We enjoyed talking to you guys about Dabo today, Mike Shula, some other things going on around the program, Clemson Bama 4. So until Monday at 1 o'clock Eastern time, my name is Mike Johnson. It's been a pleasure bringing the show to you guys this week, and you guys have a good weekend and Roll Tide.
You've been watching Roll Tide Daily, the new daily program for Crimson Tide fans, presented by SEC Country.